Welcome everyone. I'm going to go through a couple of housekeeping items first, just to get that out of the way. First of all, thank you all for keeping your lines muted. Please keep your line muted until the end of the presentation, at which point you can unmute and ask a question over the phone if you'd like. If you're having trouble hearing or trouble accessing the audio, you can call in either using the instructions in the chat or by calling the number that you see on the screen there. Both the slides for the webinar today, as well as a recording of the webinar, will be available on the ARDRAW website about a week after today. So keep an eye out for that. And if you do have any kind of technical issues that pop up mid-webinar, please feel free to reach out to my colleague, Susie Sodergren, whose email address you see up there on the screen. All right, so welcome to the ARDRAW Small Grant Program Informational Webinar. My name is Erica Smitka. I am the Program Coordinator at Policy Research, Inc., and I will hand it over to my colleague, Laura King at SSA to introduce herself. Laura?
Hello, my name is Laura King. I am the Project Officer for the ARDRAW Small Grant Program here at the Social Security Administration, and I would like to second Erica in welcoming you all. We're very glad to have so many people that are interested in this grant program. So, Erica, I'll let you get us going.
Thanks so much, Laura. All right, so we're excited to be recruiting this year for our 5th ARDRAW cohort. So today we're going to give you an overview of the program. We'll talk a little bit about the application process. We have a few students from our current cohort on the line, so you will hear from them. Then I'll hand it back over to Laura, who will give us an overview of some SSA program areas before we wrap up with some time for questions. So at any time throughout the webinar, you may type a question into the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. And then, as I said earlier, if you would like to ask a question over the phone, just hold off on that until we get to the end of the presentation. So the ARDRAW, or the long name, is Analyzing Relationships Between Disability, Rehabilitation, and Work Small Grant Program. Is a program that is sponsored by the Social Security Administration, but is coordinated by Policy Research, Inc., which is located in snowy Del Mar, New York. You can find more information, and you will also be able to apply via the website, which is ardraw.policyresearchinc.org. A brief kind of background about ARDRAW is the program is actually a successor program to the Disability Determination Process, or the DDP Small Grant Program. The DDP program had a very similar structure, just a different research focus. So those projects, the completed versions of those projects, as well as any and all ARDRAW projects, can also be found on our website under the Completed Projects tab. So this program was designed to really give students the opportunity and the support to further their independent research skills, as well as to promote continued funding in the area of disability research. It really encourages students to look at a new analysis of work, rehabilitation, and disability issues. And as I said earlier, this will be our 5th ARDRAW cohort. So the focus really is to expand research in the field of disability studies as it relates to work and rehabilitation. But the specific focus is then relating this research and relating your findings back to current SSA employment and disability programs, and really taking a look and examining how your findings will impact will have future policy implications. Some suggested topics, as you can see there, you might want to look at characteristics of current beneficiaries, take a look at workplace accommodations or the impact of policy changes on someone's ability to work, or you can take a deeper dive into vocational or other services that are currently being used by beneficiaries. On the website, we also have a suggested topics list that's specific to the 2021 application period. So you can take a look at that online. One of the areas that will certainly be of interest is going to be the effect that COVID-19 has had in this this area of research. All right, so the program is a one-year research program. It's offered to full and part-time graduate students or PhD candidates. Students who are accepted are expected to do this a one-year, it's a supervised but independent research project, which can have either a qualitative or a quantitative focus. Before students apply, you should find a mentor in your department, in your program, who is willing to and committed to working with you throughout the year and providing some guidance for your research project. The contract also awards a $10,000 stipend to each student, which can be used to help fund your research project. Some students have used it to provide interview incentives, but it can also be used to just support a student with living expenses, etc. So in addition to the research part of the program, we also offer a number of different professional development opportunities throughout the year. So you can find writing and research resources on the ARDRAW website already. And as of this year, we will also be able to provide students with a more directed publishing guidance, so they can take their final product or final ARDRAW paper and be able to submit it to peer-reviewed journals more easily. The program also currently offers conference funding to support student attendees, eventually in-person conferences, but for now we've been supporting students to attend and present at virtual conferences. You also can have the opportunity to connect directly with an SSA expert. A lot of students have been able to get some further clarification on points related to their research project that has been very helpful for them. And then lastly, students are offered the chance to present their ARDRAW research on an SSA-sponsored webinar series in the summer. I'll say, be remiss if I didn't mention the other opportunity, which is the ability to connect. We have a few calls throughout the year in which the cohort gets together and connects over a webinar. Students are able to share and collaborate with each other, maybe what's going well in their research, what they could use a little bit of help on. And so it really is a great opportunity to, as I said, collaborate and then network with your peers who are in a similar field. All right, so that was a brief kind of overview of the program, but let's change gears and we can talk a little bit more about the details as it relates to the expectations, the deliverables, and then specifically the application process. So as I said, you must be a full or part-time graduate student in an accredited program at the time of the award. So in this case, that would be the fall semester of 2021. We typically look at students who have an academic emphasis on the majors that you see listed there, but it's not a requirement. We often receive really interesting proposals from students outside of these expertise areas, and we're always looking for a new perspective and a new approach to research in the field. So don't let that dissuade you if you don't see your major out there. You must also be a U.S. citizen or a non-citizen national, and as I mentioned earlier, you must have that university faculty mentor support, someone who's committed to supporting you throughout the year of that research. Unfortunately, employees of SSA are not eligible, and if you're currently receiving funds from another SSA source, that would also make you ineligible. Although if that last bullet applies to you, I would encourage you to reach out to me. You can reach me at ardraw@policyresearchinc.com. And we can talk about the specifics of what that might look like for you. All right, so in order to apply, you'll complete the application packet on the ARDRAW website. The packet includes the 5 things that you see listed there. Certainly the first one is going to be the most important. It's an abstract and a research proposal, which is a firm kind of 5 pages, but it's really where you're going to be able to get into the meat of your project and relay to the reviewers why it's important and what you're going to kind of uncover. So that's where we really, that's the piece that we dig into the most. But these other ones are not unimportant. So in order to apply, you should also have proof of access to data. If you are using a publicly available data source or an existing data source, I should say, you just need to at least prove either A, that it's public, or B, that you have access to it in some way. But if you are going to be doing your own collecting your own data, for this bullet, what we would like you to do is provide us with an overview for your recruitment plan, and let us know how you're going to get participants involved in your study. The third bullet there is IRB approval or time frame. So we know that IRBs don't always have the fastest turnaround time. Sometimes they do, but it's okay if you don't have IRB approval before applying. That you should indicate to us that either A, you have applied, or provide us with some sort of timeline for when you expect to hear back from your IRB. We'll also want to see a copy of your resume or CV, and then you should have your recommender send 2 letters of recommendation directly to that ARDRAW email address. And one of those letters should come directly from your mentor. So the application is due February 26th, 2021, and we will let you know by April 22nd. So I'll briefly touch on kind of the selection criteria and how we go about accepting which applications we do accept. But I would encourage you all to really read through a detailed description that's currently in the RFA, which will give you kind of the breakdown of how these sections how the sections of your application are weighted, and really what's the most important thing to focus on. So the initial process is we just review every application to make sure it's relevant to the research objectives, and to make sure that it's complete. The second level there is me. I'll review every application, and then I might reach out to you and give you some feedback or some suggested improvements to your proposal before it moves on to the next level. So that third and the final step is going to be a review from a panel of experts, a panel of researchers, as well as the Social Security Administration. So once you've been selected, as my predecessor would have said, you do a little happy dance, and then you will have 1 month, just over 1 month in this case, to submit a detailed work plan. So that work plan is due by June 1st, and once that work plan must be approved before you can receive the final approval and awarded the grant. But once your work plan is approved, you'll receive the official award, and you'll be granted the first installment of that award, which is it's broken up into 2 pieces. So the first installment is $5,000. After that point, you and your mentor will be expected to participate in 4 quarterly calls, which are in August, November, February, and May. And then you're also expected to adhere to all deliverables, including that previously noted work plan, quarterly reports, which will be due on the 15th of the month prior to the call months that I just listed out. And then a 15-page research paper is going to be the final product of this program. And so your draft is expected to be submitted by May 13th, and then your final paper would be due June 24th. Well, there's no need to frantically write. We'll also obviously go over these things again once you are admitted. But once you submit that final paper, you would receive that second installment of the award, so the second $5,000. We do always get a couple of similar questions when it comes to the research stipend. So you're actually not, it is a true stipend. You're not required to have a budget, and you're not required to report on those funds. It really is a true stipend award. We can run it through your university if your university or your mentor would prefer it that way, and then they can apply it directly to your account from there. If you would like to do it as a group project, you can do it as a group project. I think in the past we've only ever had students work in a group of 2. I can't remember one in which we've had more than that, but if you are working in a group project, one representative of the team receives that payment, and then from there you decide how you want to kind of disperse it amongst the 2 of you. And then you may pay participants with the stipend funds. As I noted earlier, that's what frequently we see a lot of students using that as incentives for participants in surveys, et cetera. So I'll go over a couple of quick tips for success, but our current students who are on the line, Catherine and Rumi, will really give you the more in-depth tips. But I would say make sure your topic's relevant. Really do take a look at that suggested topic list that we have on the website. We really want to make sure that you're able to relate your research back to SSA programs. And then going off of that, you should have a basic understanding of SSA programs and how they're set up. I think this third bullet is probably the most important, though. Make sure your research is feasible. Make sure it can be completed in a year. Make sure you have enough participants. Recruitment, just never goes as expected, right? So you should have a plan A and a plan B, and then in some cases a plan C. If you're not going to be recruiting people, make sure you have access to that data source prior to submitting your application. We don't want to be kind of like, don't want you to have to hang on and wait to really get started on your research while waiting either for access to your data or for your IRB to approve your project. So those things are all important, but again, you'll hear from our current students in just 1 minute, actually. A very quick timeline recap of all the dates that are important. The most important date to keep in mind at this point, though, is the application deadline. So February 26th, 2021 is when you should have all of your materials ready to go. All right, so as I said, we are very fortunate to have 2 of our current cohort 4 students on the line to give you some tips and advice about the application process as well as the program in general. So both students will stay on the line until the question and answer period. So if you have any specific questions for them, you can feel free to direct them to them at that time. So first we have Catherine Hurley. Catherine is a PhD candidate at George Washington University, and this year is her 3rd time participating in the ARDRAW Small Grant Program. She was also a member of our 2nd and 3rd cohort, and we were really thrilled to be able to welcome her back to our 4th cohort. So I will hand it over to you. Catherine?
Erica, thank you so much, and thank you to everybody for being here today. Hello to everyone who's on the line. So I'm just going to go over a few application tips that come from my experience and some general tips, and I reiterate much of what Erica said in this, and you'll hear some repeat themes that I'll hit on. So in terms of application tips, I believe that it's really important to move forward a little bit, excuse me. I believe it's really important to apply with a study idea you really care about. You'll be sitting with this project for a year. It'll be taking your time, your brain power. You'll be taking the time from your participants and so forth. So to make sure it's something you really are dedicated to, a population or a question, and both, that you're really dedicated to and you really care about. And kind of to that point, to think about how the study can help the populations of interest with whom you're working and to include them in the process as much as possible, I think is really important for this research and all research. Thinking about how this study can answer questions related to Social Security benefits and other projects of the SSA are also really important because that's what this grant is about. That's what this funding is about when you're thinking about grantsmanship, as they say. So thinking about why you're applying to ARDRAW and to answer questions for the Social Security Administration and to write towards these goals in your application. Your goals of helping this population, of answering questions that are pertinent to Social Security Administration and so forth, and to keep those things in mind. And to expect to get great feedback from the reviewers and to apply that feedback. So I've gotten wonderful feedback when I've applied in these past 3 cycles, and that feedback has helped me shape the projects that I've ended up doing in the subsequent year after each project. Additionally, in terms of general tips, I would say to stay in touch with ARDRAW about your progress, about your pitfalls, and anything else that comes up, as Erica mentioned, about recruiting, that can, I think all researchers like to recruit more people, and we always run into some roadblocks potentially along the way. So to stay in touch about the good things and the challenges you're having. That moved forward again on me, excuse me. And that the folks at ARDRAW and SSA are really here to help you. They really want, they have this grant that's based on helping students do research, and they really want to see us all succeed. And remember that this is a 1-year grant, as Erica said, so keep that in mind when you're creating your work plan, when you're thinking of structuring the question you're going to ask and how you're going to recruit, that you really have this 1 year to do this project start to finish. And And I would just say learn a lot, research a lot, and engage with the process because you get what you put into it. It's this somewhat unique experience as a graduate student where this is for you. This is a grant for your project, for your question, for you to, get out and do that research that you're really passionate about. So just have a good time with it and enjoy the process and, work hard at it and you'll get all of that back. So thank you very much. And I'll hand it back over to you, Erica and Rumi.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That was great. All right, so next we will hear from Rumi Agarwal. Rumi is a PhD candidate at Florida International University, and this is Rumi's first year participating in the ARDRAW program, and we certainly hope it won't be our last. Rumi?
Thank you, Erica. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this presentation. I'll get started with some tips for the application from my perspective. Like Erica said, this was my first year being part of the cohort, so I have some fresh experience to share. So like Erica had mentioned earlier, look at the suggested topics on the ARDRAW website. My research study for my application actually stemmed from an idea that was suggested by ARDRAW itself. The second thing I would try to remind you of is to keep your research idea simple. For many of you, like it was for me, it was my first time doing an independent research project. So trying to keep it simple with one key issue and a population that you're interested in is really important to make sure that it's feasible and doable in the 1 year that you're going to be doing independent research for the first time. The next thing I would say is to seek out individuals who work with your topic of interest, especially people who are working with it day in and day out and not necessarily academics or people in the research side. And the reason why I say that is you might be able to talk to them and understand what are their day-to-day barriers or issues that they face that you might be able to integrate into your idea. And the thing to remember while you're doing that is be resourceful, think outside of the box of where you might be able to find somebody to talk to, and just stay humble. And that's been my experience. Just be grateful for their time and, be sure to share with them results when they are available, and if you are able to do that. And also keep them in the loop if there's anything that, you want to check in with them and double check to make sure that you're on the right track. Don't rush thinking about the research design and the analysis plan. The more time you spend thinking about it now, the easier it will be later. So I know you have a little less than a month left for your application. So just really take this time to think out what your analysis will look like and what research design will best fit your question. Take the feedback you receive on your application into consideration. Like Catherine said, that feedback really is very helpful. I know it really changed the trajectory of some of my ideas based on the feedback I received, and they really do want to help you succeed. In terms of some general tips, because of the current world we live in with COVID, a lot of research designs and research options are out the window. So if you do plan to do online survey research, really think if you need to offer a financial incentive or use social media for recruiting. I've had some trouble with both of those factors, which is why I throw it out there for you to reconsider. When you're designing your data collection tools, take the time to keep analysis and the variables that you're interested in mind. Again, this will help you make sure that you can answer the research questions you set out to. If you're using an online survey, make sure you add attention checks throughout your instrument. And if you're using an online platform, make sure it has really strong security features that go beyond reCAPTCHA. And when you start planning your paper, try and envision what your final result section of your paper might look like. Think about the headings that you would be interested in and the kind of findings you would be looking for when you start designing your idea. Like Erica mentioned, one of the things that's part of the grant is quarterly calls and reports that you are responsible for. I have found it really helpful to create a sheet of paper where I literally write down all of the dates and activities that I am undertaking on a day-to-day basis. And with that file, it becomes a lot easier to write up that quarterly report and be prepared for the quarterly call. If you wait till the call or the report to start thinking back to all of those events that have happened, you might miss something that's actually quite important. And lastly, like Catherine mentioned as well, keep ARDRAW updated with any changes and progress. It's better to keep them informed as things happen rather than surprise them with anything. And it just makes for a better relationship, in my opinion. So that's it in terms of tips, general tips and application tips from my side. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you so much, Rumi, and thank you to you both. Those are really great set of tips that you both offered. So certainly keep those in mind as you go to apply. All right, I will now hand it over to our Federal Program Officer, Laura King, who will talk a little bit more about SSA program areas. Laura.
Thank you, Erica. So as Erica and everyone else has mentioned throughout the call, it is really important to have a little bit of knowledge about SSA's disability programs and some of our program areas. And I know that not everybody who works with disability research in general is necessarily very familiar with our programs. So we just wanted to do a quick overview. For those of you who might be more familiar, please bear with us while I provide a little bit of information. So among the programs that SSA administers, we have two different disability programs. The first is our Social Security Disability Insurance Program. So SSDI, as we call it, is the program that is paid for through the OSDI taxes that come out of everyone's paycheck. So this is for people that have worked and paid into the trust fund and are insured. And then we also have the Supplemental Security Income Program, SSI. So this is a means-tested program that provides payments to people who have limited income and assets and are aged, blind, or disabled. So these are people that may not have worked or paid into the trust fund. So this program is an alternate for people who don't qualify for SSDI. So every federal agency that works with individuals who are disabled, we all have our own definition of disability, which may sound crazy, but because each federal agency is administering programs based on different needs, we have different requirements. So SSA's specific definition of disability is the inability to engage in substantial gainful activity because of a medically determinable impairment that is expected to result in death or that has lasted or is expected to last for a period of 12 continuous months. Which begs the question, what is substantial gainful activity? So, substantial gainful activity is basically, are you able to work? So if you're able to make over a certain amount of money a month, that is considered substantial gainful activity. Each year, the amount goes up just a little bit. So the monthly amounts for 2021 are $1,310 for non-blind individuals and $2,190 for individuals who are blind. If you didn't know this about Social Security, individuals who are blind are actually eligible for slightly higher payments. It's a little quirk in the system. So substantial gainful activity is basically a guideline that we use to determine if someone is able to work and therefore if they are eligible for our disability programs. So there's a whole lot of information on Social Security's disability programs. They really are rather complex and personally, maybe a little bit biased, pretty interesting. So if you aren't familiar with our programs, this is a good place to start. This is a link to the Social Security website and kind of goes into how to qualify for disability and the steps in the determination process. And if you are considering applying for this program, I highly suggest making sure that you are reasonably familiar with the program so that you can link your research back to our disability programs and our beneficiaries. So one more topic I wanted to cover that is of special interest for this small grant program is work incentives, because we are kind of looking at like how people manage that, either their transition out of work into benefits or back to work after being on benefits. So SSA has developed certain rules, our work incentives, to help people who are receiving our benefits if they want to try to return to work. This kind of lets them explore if they're going to be able to go back to work and to kind of make that transition without them immediately losing access to benefits. Because we do understand that that's a big jump and nobody wants to like jump off a cliff if they don't know what's going to be on the other side. So they're a little bit different, the work incentives for the SSDI program and for the SSI program, because the programs themselves are a little bit different. So for the SSDI recipients, these work incentives allow them to have a little bit higher monthly income than SGA would normally allow, to try to help them make that transition. And then for SSI recipients, since the amount of income an individual has determines what the amount of benefit they're allowed to get, the work incentives allow for some exclusions, some income exclusions, which allow them to continue to get a higher benefit payment. So that's just a very quick overview of work incentives as a whole. If you want to learn more about them, the Red Book, which is the entirety of our work incentives policy, is available on our website. So anyway, that's just a very quick overview of our programs. I hope you'll spend a little bit more time getting to know them if you aren't familiar with them already. And I'll hand it back to Erica.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was great. Okay, so now we will open up the floor for questions. We have a few students who are currently typing in the chat box, so I'll read those questions aloud and answer them here. If you would like to ask a question over the phone, you may do so by clicking there should be like an individual with their hand raised on the top of your screen, and you can click on that button and quote unquote raise your hand, and we'll unmute you, and you can then go ahead and ask your question over the phone. So one question we got from Michael Brady. Michael says it sounds like there are two options for the award. Option one is to run the study through the university's sponsored research office. The funds could be used to fund the student PI, data collection, research assistance, data software runs, etc. The university would issue the funding in that case. And then option two is to award the funds directly to the student PI, and the student may hire a research assistant from there. And that is correct, Michael, although I have to say most students decide to do the former and kind of manage the money, but you can certainly go through your university if you would prefer that as an option. All right, our next question is from Catherine. Catherine says, is this program exclusively for PhD students, or are master's students also eligible? Catherine, master's students are certainly eligible and are welcome to apply. And she says, also, if we cannot find a faculty mentor from our program, is it feasible to find one from another institution? So we try to dissuade students from doing that just because it becomes a little bit more difficult to manage meetings, to manage that connection. And we really want to make sure that you have a mentor that's able to kind of be there and really guide you through the process. But if that is, if you are unable to find a mentor at your institution, certainly reach out to me and we can talk about the specifics. It's not an option, so don't let that dissuade you from applying. So, all right. So Jade says, is a secondary data analysis appropriate for this project? For example, using publicly available data sets. Yes, Jade. Yep, you can certainly use publicly available data sets, and we have a group of students every cohort who do so. All right, so we got another question here from Gabrielle. Gabrielle says, how would proof of data work for something like primary qualitative data collection? So that's a great question, and you're obviously not going to be able to kind of prove you have access to that data. So in that case, when you are applying that section, you should instead include a recruitment plan for how you plan to get participants engaged in your project and how you plan to gather that data. I think students usually will submit probably a half page to a page long outline of what their research or their recruitment plan might look like. For that question, I wonder, Rumi, do you have anything that you would want to add to that? You've had to create a recruitment plan this year.
Sorry, Eric, are you talking about Gabrielle's question about the proof of data for the primary qualitative data collection?
Yes, yeah, I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about how you were able to set up a recruitment plan or what that looks like for your study.
So initially the study was a qualitative data collection plan before COVID hit, and that was going to be focus group studies that I was going to recruit from the community using snowball sampling. And I had a pool of students at the university who had intellectual disabilities, and I was going to recruit via flyers and emails those parents, and then ask them to snowball that out to people they knew in the community. So that was part of my recruitment plan, original recruitment plan.
Thank you for that, Ruby. That's helpful. Okay. All right, so we have another question from Jordana who says, do students need to be enrolled throughout the program? For example, if a student is enrolled in the fall and graduates early, would they still be eligible to receive the grant? You would still be eligible to receive the grant. So you just have to be enrolled in the fall of 2021. Similar to the mentor question, we just want to make sure that you're able to have that support and connection to your university throughout the project. So that's really the main reason for wanting to make sure that students are enrolled. But we have, I think, had a couple of students who have graduated early, so that would certainly be okay. And I see a question here from Emily. And Emily, I would love to connect with you offline about this, and I can give you some more information, and we can talk more about the structure of your project. I want to make sure I'm able to answer your question with the depth that it deserves. All right, let's see. So we have a question for Matthew. Emily, I saw you put a note in the chat. So either reach out to me via email, or I believe I might have your email as well from the registration, so we can talk later. So Matthew says, how do doctoral students work the one-time frame and deliverables of ARDRAW into their dissertation? Do people usually focus their ARDRAW work on a dissertation chapter? Thank you for asking that question, Matthew. That's actually a question that we get asked a lot. Okay, that makes sense. 1 year time frame. So you can, we know that you're all like very busy students, and most of you are going to be writing your dissertation. So you can make your ARDRAW research a part of that dissertation, but it really should be able to stand alone as its own project and its own paper. So what a lot of students do is, yes, they might kind of section it out as its own chapter in their dissertation. I think that's probably the best approach. But as long as you can kind of, make it its own project and make it its own own paper and kind of own entity, then you should be okay. All right, so it looks like those are all the questions that we have in the chat. So I would like to open up the lines if anyone wants to ask a question over the phone. Well, you may certainly ask a question via the chat as well. All right, we'll give it maybe just one more minute here for any lingering questions, and then we can wrap up.
Hi, this is Andrea
waiting, I'll just say, hi, Andrea, go ahead.
So if you have a project that you recently started that you think is a good fit for this grant, could you apply with like an existing project that's in progress, or does it have to be a brand new project?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and we can talk a little bit more offline if you want to talk about the specifics. Some of it would depend on if that project is already funded. But if it's not already funded, then I don't see why you could certainly apply with a project that is in the process. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so well, we might have one or two more questions coming in here through the chat. So I would just encourage you all to obviously check out the ARDRAW website for when you go to apply. But if you do have any more specific questions, feel free to reach out to me either via the ARDRAW email, which is posted at the top, or via my kind of personal, more direct email, which is right there, esmitka@prainc.com. I see that Jade has a question in the chat. So are topics surrounding work-related issues the most relevant to this funding? Jade, yes. Yes, the answer would be yes in that instance. But really that, I, again, would encourage you to take a look at that suggested topics list. Can give you some interesting ideas and ways to look at issues differently. While we wait for maybe a couple other students here to enter questions into the chat, I'll certainly open the line if anyone on our panel today would like to say any kind of last-minute comments or address any more specifics to questions that students have asked thus far. Claire, I see your question in the chat here. I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about the specifics of that. So based on just a quick read through of your question, Claire is wondering, because she works at a nonprofit and she's paid via grant funding, would that preclude her from applying for this? And I don't think that it would preclude you from applying for this whatsoever. But if you would like to talk about the details before you get your application together, I'm happy to do so. But based off of your question here, I would say no, that wouldn't preclude you. And Gabrielle asked if the population of 65 plus ever be of interest if work-related issues is the most pertinent. That's a really interesting question. I'll actually hand this one over to my colleague Laura.
So this is Laura. Generally, when SSA is looking at issues related to work, we are looking at what we consider the working age population, 18 to 65. Or sometimes we look at transition, so people that are age 14 to usually about 25 that are transitioning into the workforce. But there is some increase in people over the age of 65 working. So it might be worth submitting to, but this might be another one where if you have something specific in mind where you send that information to Erica and we kind of talk about it offline in a specific rather than just a broad overview.
Yeah, I'm happy to connect with you offline, Gabrielle, if you want to talk about those details. Certainly. Thank you, Laura. Okay, let's give it maybe one more minute or two, see if there's any lingering questions. Jade, yep, we can pop that link. Jade asked if we could share the link to SSA programs again, and we can certainly pop that in the chat. All right, there are a few different links that were included, but I've attached one to get you started. So, okay, well, I think that's about it. So I just want to thank you all for joining us on the call today. I look forward to reading all of your applications. And if you do have any more specific questions, please feel free to reach out to me and the ARDRAW team. We are happy to help. Thank you so much, everybody.